UU, namely the goal community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And then the rest of the entire program is readings. So let me introduce our poet of the morning, end of the year, Ann Kenniston. Ann graduated with honors in English from University of Chicago, took a master's at NYU, and turned to creative writing at about the same time.
Yeah, it was a master's.
And then completed her PhD in English at Boston University. And she has had a continuing particular interest in poetry, and particularly contemporary poetry. And she is a professor of English at University of Nevada, Reno, where she teaches English and creative writing. And we have featured one of her collections of poetry, in particular, the Cautions of Human Gesture, in previous years, although it's been many years now. So we're welcoming Ann back to an annual celebration of the National Poetry Month. Last year, she sent one of her graduate students, Manuela Williams.
Yeah, Williams, yes.
And Manuela was wonderful. But we're glad to have you back.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Wouldn't be April.
So we're going to read a series of poems that are related in one way or another about war. One of them, Ann is going to explain to me why it's included. And but I'm going to begin with Wilfred Owen's poem Dulce et Decorum Est. Now, Wilfred Owen is one of three particularly celebrated British poets of World War I. Owen had started writing poetry before he joined the Artists' Rifles, as his unit was called, and very much influenced by Keats and Wordsworth and William Butler Yeats. No, I should add that William Butler Yeats did not return the admiration. In fact, said that Wilfred Owen was not fit to be in the poet's corner of any country newspaper. Sort of charming to think that British country newspapers had poets in the States. But the British public obviously did not agree with Yeats, since Wilfred Owen is memorialized in the Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. So, and this is one of his most popular poems. I think what's charming about it to me is the irony with which he treats the phrase from a chorus, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, which means sweet and proper it is to die for one's country. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed to coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime, dim through the misty panes and thick green light as under a green sea. I saw him drowning in all my dreams before my helpless sight. He plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin. If you could, at every jolt, the blood come gargling from the froth corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest the children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori.
And one wonderful thing about this poem that someone pointed out to me is that it is actually a double reverse sonnet. So it's 24 lines, and it has the first 8 lines, then it has the middle. So it's, if you count the lines, it's actually not only referring back to the Latin poem, but also kind of a contortion of this poem, the sonnet that we think of as a love poem for sweetness.
Yeah. Wilfred Owen was seriously wounded in the midst of the war, and in fact lay unconscious among the dead, apparently for days before he was rescued, and then evacuated to a rehabilitation hospital in Edinburgh called Craig Lockhart.
Right.
And that's where he met Siegfried Sassoon, who was a great influence on him. He's one of the other 3 major British poets of World War I. And it was Sassoon that pressed him toward moving from a more romantic style to this very and guts and dirt kind of realism that's reflected in this poem.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful novel about that. Have you read that? Regeneration by Pat Barker.
Oh, no.
Oh, it is about Craig Lockhart and the Dr. Rivers, who the psychologist or psychiatrist there, who had this different way of treating shell shock. So rather, a more sort of psychological, psychoanalytic mode rather than, doing, horrific things to get people back into battle. But it actually relies on a draft of, I believe it's this poem with Sassoon's annotations on it. It's really a great book, so I recommend it if you're interested.
So Regeneration.
Yeah.
It's a trilogy. It's
Yeah, there are 3
3 books.
Yeah, but Regeneration is the first.
Oh,
And about it's just a really very affecting account of them at this hospital. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Randall Jarrell is an American poet of World War II. Jarrell was from Nashville, went to Vanderbilt, where he was influenced by Robert Penn Warren and John Crowe Ransom, Alan Tate, and then 1942 he joined he said he was in the most poetic branch of the Army Air Force, namely the Celestial Navigation Tower. But obviously his perception of the war was not romantic. And that's reflected in what is probably his most famous poem. And he feared that he would become so identified with it that we neglected the rest of his poetry. But I think you'll see why here. The death of the ball turret gunner. And by the way, the ball turret was sort of a globe-like underbelly of the bombers in World War II, so that the gunner could spin around and address any threat coming from any direction. So just imagine that globe with the gunner in it on the belly of the column. The death of the ball turret gunner. From my mother's sleep, I fell into the state. I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loosed from its dream of life, I woke to black flak and the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. That's almost our shortest poem.
Yes.
Well, the third poem is by John Ciardi, another poet, American poet of World War II. He also served, I think, in the Army Air Force, and his first collection of poetry, in fact, was entitled "Homeward to America," which I think is a reference to the end of the war. And this takes a somewhat different tack, namely the outcome of the war in Europe. It's called The Gift. In 1945, when the keepers cried kaput, Joseph Stein, poet, came out of Dachau like a half a resurrection, his other 80 pounds still in their invisible grave. Slowly then the mouth opened, first a broth, and then a medication, and then a diet, all in time, and the knitting mercies, the showing bones were buried back in flesh. And the miracle was finished. Joseph Stein, man and poet, rose, walked, and could even beget, and did, and died later of other causes, only partly traceable to his first death. He noted with some surprise at first, the strangers could not tell he had died once. He returned to his post in the library, drank his beer, published 3 poems in a French magazine, and was very kind to the son who at last was his. In the spent of one night, he wrote 3 propositions: that hell is the denial of the ordinary, that nothing lasts, that clean white paper waiting under a pen is a gift beyond history and hurt and heaven.
You started out with some powerfully emotional pieces there.
Well, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you can talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're gonna jump to a couple of other poems about World War II or the Holocaust. Death Feud by Paul Celan is Celan's most famous poem. Celan was a Romanian Jew who was deported to a labor camp. His parents were both deported to camps and died or were killed there. And he is a poet. Who he grew up speaking German. He wrote in German, but wrote a lot about kind of the aftermath of the war. And his poems tend to be quite disjunctive. They don't always totally make sense. They're very hard to translate because he used these puns that were and sort of like undid grammar in a lot of cases. So this poem has some of those elements. It refers to 2 characters, Shulamit and Marguerite, who I actually was just at SF MoMA last week, and there's these amazing paintings by Kiefer, Anselm Kiefer, if you're there, and there's one actually called Shulamit and one called Marguerite. So the kind of importance of this poem and these characters. So Shulamit as the kind of Jewish character and Marguerite as the golden-haired Aryan character, and the way that has influenced other artists. And a fugue, of course, is a piece that has repetition in it. death feud. Black milk of morning, we drink you. Evenings, we drink you. At noon and mornings, we drink you. At night, we drink and we drink. A man lives in the house. He plays with the snakes. He writes when it darkens to Deutschland, your golden hair, Margarita. He writes and steps in front of his house, and the stars glisten, and he whistles his dogs to come. He whistles his Jews to appear. Let a grave be dug in the earth. He commands us, play up for the dance. Black milk of dawn, we drink you at night. We drink you mornings and noontime. We drink you evenings. We drink and we drink. A man lives in the house. He plays with the snakes. He writes when it turns dark to Deutschland, your golden hair, Margarita, your ashen hair, Schulamit. We dig a grave in the air. There one lies at ease. He calls, jab deeper into the earth, you there, and you other men, sing and play. He grabs the gun in his belt. He draws it, his eyes are blue. Jab deeper, your spades, you there, and you other men, continue to play for the dance. Black milk of dawn, we drink you at night. We drink you at noon. We drink you evenings. We drink you and drink. A man lives in the house, your golden hair, Margarita, your ashen hair, Schulamit. He plays with the snakes. He calls out, play death more sweetly. Death is a master from Deutschland. He calls, scrape those fiddles more darkly. Then as smoke, you'll rise in the air. Then you'll have a grave in the clouds. There you'll lie at ease. Black milk of dawn. We drink you at night. We drink you at noon. Death is a master from Deutschland. We drink you evenings and mornings. We drink and drink. Death is a master from Deutschland. His eye is blue. He strikes you with lead bullets. His aim is true. A man lives in the house, your golden hair, Margarita. He sets his dogs on us. He gifts us a grave in the air. He plays with the snakes and dreams death is a master from Deutschland. Your golden hair, Margarita, your ashen hair, Schulamit. Yeah, so that's a pretty powerful poem, right? Powerful because it's repetitive and that image of black milk is just in itself so powerful. So then the next two poems are also about World War II, but from an American perspective. They're by Gwendolyn Brooks, who is an African-American poet who sort of was prominent after the Harlem Renaissance, which was a period of African-American poetry in, primarily in New York, that was really focused on using traditional European forms like the sonnet. But she also overlapped with a later kind of more radical period called the Black Arts Movement, where poets were really trying to resist those old forms. And she wasn't totally embraced by the Black Arts poets, but I think she's really come into her own in the last few decades. There are many, many young African-American poets and other poets who see her as a formative influence. She lived in Chicago. She wrote a lot of poems about kind of ordinary people living in Chicago in their apartments, about the poor, etc. So there are two poems that I included. Maybe we just have time to read one of them.
I think we have time. We ought to go back to facing it.
Yes, that's later.
But you're-
Later, yes, we're going chronologically. This first poem, again, I mentioned the sonnet form. Brooks is in the form of a sonnet, but it is also a ballad in that it's telling a story. So she's sort of thinking about telling more of a story within the sonnet form. Ballad tends to be a narrative form that's longer. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? They took my lover's tallness off to war, left me lamenting. Now I cannot guess what I can use an empty heart cup for. He won't be coming back here anymore. Someday the war will end, But oh, I knew when he was walking grandly out that door that my sweet love would have to be untrue, would have to be untrue, would have to court coquettish death, whose impudent and strange possessive arms and beauty of a sort can make a hard man hesitate and change. And he will be the one to stammer, yes. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? So, you know, let me just read the next poem by her too, because this is a poem in a series about soldiers having returned to the US after the war. So she's really interested in depicting the war kind of from the domestic perspective, from those who are at home. Gay chaps at the bar. And guys I knew in the States, young officers returned from the front crying and trembling. Gay chaps at the bar in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. Lieutenant William Couch in the South Pacific. We knew how to order, just the dash necessary, the length of gaiety and good taste, whether the raillery should be slightly iced and given green or served up hot and lush. We knew how to give to women the summer spread, the tropics of our love, when to persist or hold a hunger off, knew white speech, how to make a look, an omen. But nothing ever taught us to be islands and smart athletic language for this. No stout lesson showed how to chat with death. We brought no brass fortissimo among our talents to holler down the lions in this air. So you can see that she is speaking in the voices and through the characters of ordinary people, right? Not speaking as herself, but trying to occupy the perspective of others. Okay, so now let's go back to facing it. So Yusuf Kumunyaka is an African-American poet who served in Vietnam and writes a lot about the Vietnam War. This poem is among his most famous, I think. And it's about being at the Vietnam Memorial, which, if you've been at, is a kind of reflective stone. But I'm explaining that to you. He doesn't tell us exactly where he is in the poem. So we're meant to kind of figure it out. Facing it. My black face fades, hiding inside the black granite. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No tears. I'm stone, I'm flesh. My clouded reflection eyes me like a bird of prey, the profile of night slanted against morning. I turn this way, the stone lets me go. I turn that way. I'm inside the Vietnam Veterans Memorial again, depending on the light to make a difference. I go down the 58,022 names, half expecting to find my own in letters like smoke. I touch the name Andrew Johnson. I see the booby trap's white flash. Names shimmer on a woman's blouse, but when she walks away, the names stay on the wall. Brushstrokes flash, a red bird's wings cutting across my stare. The sky, a plane in the sky, a white vet's image floats closer to me. Then his pale eyes look through mine. I'm a window. He's lost his right arm inside the stone. In the black mirror, a woman's trying to erase names. No, she's brushing a boy's hair.
Of the way he blends the reality
Yeah.
here with the reflection.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of what's happening.
Yeah, it's so, and that final image, it's just so gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah, and the way that the booby trap comes in, but there's not a lot of detail about the war, but it's there. Yeah,
Says it in that one line.
yeah.
To me.
So maybe,
Well,
or do you want to
move
go?
on to another war.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, we have.
So we'll skip The Death of a Soldier by Wallace Stevens. We'll go right to Maxine Kuhn.
Do you wanna do extraordinary rendition?
Oh, well, all right, sure. This is called Extraordinary Rendition, and I remember what extraordinary rendition represented during the Iraq War, namely an excuse for doing something that we would ordinarily consider illegal, namely kidnapping people and removing them to sites outside of our country and theirs, to places of interrogation, I think it was. Only the oak and the beech hang on to their leaves at the end. The oak leaves bruise the color of those insurgent boys, Iraqi policemen captured, purpling their eyes and cheekbones before lining them up to testify to the Americans that no, they had not been beaten. The beech leaves dry to brown, a palette of cinnamon. They curl undefended. They have to stake in the outcome. Art redeems us from time, it has been written. Meanwhile, we've exported stress, positions, shackles, dog attacks, sleep deprivation, waterboarding. To rend, to tear one's garments or hair in anguish or rage. To render, to give what is due or owed. The Pope's message this Sunday is the spiritual value of suffering. Extraordinary how the sun comes up with its rendition of daybreak, staining the sky with indifference.
And this human is she lived on a farm for many years, and she has a lot of poems about the daily life of her farm and her horses and things. And late in her life, she died just a few years ago. She turned to writing these much more political poems. So this next poem by her I find pretty interesting because of the form that she's using. This is a form called a pantoum, which repeats every line in the next stanza. So it's a super hard form to write. I just think this is a pretty amazing poem. What you do. When nobody's looking, in the black sights, what you do. When nobody knows you are in there, what you do. When you're in the black sights, when you shackle them higher, in there, what you do. When you kill by crucifixion. When you shackle them higher, are you still Christian when you kill by crucifixion? When you ice the body, are you still Christian when you wrap it in plastic? When you ice the body, when you swear it didn't happen? When you wrap it in plastic? When the dossier's been there? When you swear it didn't happen for over a year now? When the dossier's been there for the ghost prisoner for over a year now, where nobody's looking? For the ghost prisoner, when nobody knows what you do when you're in there where nobody's looking. Obviously about Abu Dhabi. Yeah. So the next poem we're going to skip, but I just want to talk a little bit about what Solmaz Sharif is doing. She has a whole book called Look, in which she has these capitalized words, and those words, she tells us, come from a dictionary of military terms. And what she is doing in this project is taking these terms and kind of redefining them. So she's Iranian in origin, and has experienced a lot of war. So part of her sort of creative process is to take these terms, which of course are in some ways ordinary terms, disposition, distance, and to sort of pull them back out of the military context and put them back into something non-military. So that is a kind of political act, right? A reappropriation of language, kind of like what Human is doing with extraordinary rendition, right? The way these terms have been turned into military euphemisms. And what that's something that poets are very, very interested in, I think.
Mason Cuman has a similar poem called Dictionary of War or something like
Oh, is
that,
that
in which he uses these military terms from military manual that are so euphemistic.
right,
Right?
yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah, so, and then, the last poem by someone other than us, is another poem by a Palestinian American poet, Philip Metris. And this is also a poem that is doing something really interesting in terms of its source text. So this poem is based on the manual, and actually a whole book of his, the, I forget what it was called, the SOP or something manual. It was the manual for soldiers about how to treat detainees in Iraq and Guantanamo. So it was the training manual for soldiers. And what he has done is done this thing called selective erasure, where he's taken, a paragraph or something from that manual and he's erased parts of it so that it creates a different, a unique text that often undermines the original document that challenges it. So this poem, Handling the Quran, is based on a passage that is telling about how, the soldiers need to respect the Quran even as they're, engaging with prisoners and detainees.
And I would just add to that, that there was a tremendous furor, in fact, riots.
Yes.
In the Middle East, when I think the Times published.
It was a
story
WikiLeaks, I
that,
think. Yeah.
Our troops had flushed the Quran down the toilet.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It wasn't true, and the Times had to retract the story. But apparently there were some mishandling.
Yes.
Of the Quran.
Yes,
That was just
absolutely.
an exaggeration.
Yeah, and also I thought you were gonna say that this document was leaked. And that was also very controversial. So it was on, I believe it was on WikiLeaks. So this was a confidential manual and then it was released to the public. So you can find it online.
And before you could get started, if you could just give me a moment here, because I'm having difficulty spotlighting the poem for
Okay.
our folks online. And so, of
Okay.
course, as soon
It
as
looks
you
like it's
start
on-
talking, it'll go away.
Oh, okay. It's
But
on the
Zoom
screen
is
now.
just not cooperating with me this morning. So I'm just going to apologize for the folks on Zoom. As soon as Ann starts talking, the poem will disappear, but you can see it for at least a moment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well,
And the way that it's spaced out sort of suggests the language that's been removed, right? So the white space in the poem are places that he's excised from the original manual. Handling the Quran. Avoid handling or touching a language specific. To open the one, cover with one hand in an upright manner as if reading. Not every page is to be clearly see the pages. Reverence, two hands at all times. Handle as if it were fragile, delicate art. So you can see that he's also, this poem it's not really grammatical. So in some ways it's going back to the Salon poem, right? Where he's unmaking grammar as a way to kind of express this extremity of situation. Yeah, and now we have our very own Kevin.
well, did you want to read the Sharif poem? I think we have time.
Oh, okay. Are we going until 9:45?
We'll go till 10 o'clock.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah.
And then I think Michelle disappears or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Supernatural happens.
Okay, yeah. That AI thing. Deception story. Of my disposition as stoic, like a dead fish, an X said. Distance is a funny drug and used to make me a distressed person, one who cried in bedrooms and airports. Once I bawled so hard at the border, even the man with the stamps and holster said, "Don't cry, you'll be home soon." My distribution over the globe debated and set to quota, and they can handle so many of me. Ditching class, I break into my friend's dad's mansion and swim in the Beverly Hills pool in a borrowed t-shirt, a brief diversion. My body breaking the chlorinated surface makes it momentarily my house, my division, a driveway gate and alarm codes, my dress rehearsed doctrine of pool boys and ping pong and water delivered on the backs of sequin sparklets trucks. Over here, Dolly, an agent will call out, then pat the hair at your hot black dome. After explaining what she will touch, backs of the hands at the breasts and buttocks, the hand goes inside my waistband and my heart goes dormant. A dead fish, the last female assist I decided to hit on. My life in the American dream is a downgrade, a mere draft of home. Correction, it satisfies as drag. It is snarling, what I carve of it alone. And you see that she's also, that these words that she's using are alphabetical, and they always appear at the end of the line. So she sort of set this up as a form that she's invented, or a task that she's given herself. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this in to kind of highlight the really creative ways that poets are using and talking back against official language. So a very different strategy from Metris, but yeah.
Well, I think we have a little extra time, so I'd like to throw in an extra poem, if you don't mind. It's one that you suggested in an email that I missed until yesterday, and I thought, oh, that's one of my favorite poems, and I didn't even think of it. And it's Melville's Shiloh. Now, Herman Melville, you'll remember, was a contemporary of Walt Whitman, who was directly involved in the Civil War as a nurse, and this is a poem about the aftermath of the Battle of Shiloh, and it's called Shiloh, a Requiem, April 1862. Skimming lightly, wheeling still, the swallows fly low over the field in clouded days, the forest field of Shiloh. Over the field where April rain solaced the parched one stretched in pain through the pause of night that followed the Sunday fight around the church of Shiloh. The church so long the log built one that echoed to many a parting groan and natural prayer of dying foemen mingled there. Foemen at morn, but friends at eve, fame or country least their care. What like a bullet can undeceive? But now they lie low, while over them the swallows skim, and all is hushed at Shiloh.
I think that poem so beautifully reveals the kinds of challenges of writing about war, right? I mean, that he's writing about the aftermath, he's writing about the natural scene, kind of like Maxine Human in some ways, right? Yeah, but just the ways that all of these poems avoid some of the pitfalls of war poetry. And I think that much war poetry can be very kind of sloganistic and patriotic or sentimental. There's a long tradition in American poetry of that kind of approach to war. And I think, all the poets that we've read, or all the poems that we've read, are doing something really different. And I would say that contemporary poets are especially interested in challenging the kinds of conventions of both war and war poetry in different ways.
Yeah, I think what particularly appealed to me about this poem is, it turns away from the blood and guts and horror
Right.
of war that we've been focused on, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
and really focuses on reverence. So a little relief, perhaps, before we plunge back into
Right,
the
right.
horror of war.
Yeah.
And why don't you read your
Okay.
poem,
Okay.
Anniversary Ethics?
okay,
It's at the end because I couldn't slide it in, as hard as I tried, without destroying the, spacing, which is so important here. So I hope that pop-up is gonna go away,
No, there is. Yeah. So basically, it's kind of just all over the page a little bit. Yeah, I'll just read this poem. I'll say that I, kind of like overly avidly read the news and get upset about it. And so I'm trying to think about that. And I'm also thinking a lot about ethics and in the kind of broad sense and what it is and how we can live ethical lives. So I have several poems about ethics. And this poem, maybe I should start by saying, is about it was written on one of the, I think it was the last anniversary of the January 6th. Anniversary ethics. A lamentation, dirge, or death mark seems appropriate, or else a tuneless tongue with fingers in my ears. Those men and women scaling the wall seemed inhuman, like ants, or else superhuman, pumped up, arrayed like shock troops in the photo I've been staring at, faces smoke or mist obscured, their bodies transformed into a ransom note with flag patterned masks, almost glorious, as if certain of their eventual victory, though their gathering of evidence of their misdeeds is shameless, like the guy on American Idol. Here, his voice was terrible, so willingly reprieved the song. Or he didn't care as long as he was noticed. Maybe hallowed ideals are always disguised and brutal, bruised because open to so many competing interpretations, no matter that the precisely positioned decaled curtains on the windows of abandoned buildings in the 80s in the Bronx tricked no one. In dreams, I'm still compelled to enter tippy, too high houses that expand too far in all directions. So many flights of secret stairs to upper floors strewn with dirty clothes. So much abandoned junk. The hauled up, tattered flag evoked the ones on other battlements in old photos or paintings glorifying actual revolution in hindsight, liberty sometimes hefting it, bare-breasted symbol of mortal strife transformed into allegory. But the flagpole's also been deployed more literally as a rod for beating bystanders or an almost spear. Thank you.
I think writing that poem affected you emotionally as much as my writing the next one. So, in fact, as we were reading, it crossed my mind. I'm not sure I can get through it without choking up. We'll end with Ukraine, our most recent experience of war. Of course, Americans, for the most part, are not experiencing it directly, but I think we're all experiencing it indirectly. So a few things that I would point out here. One is the reason I wanted it shown on the screen is so that you could see that each stanza gets shorter until we're down to a one-line stanza of 4 words. Secondly, Theotokos is from the Orthodox liturgy and refers to the Virgin Mary as bearer of God or bringer of God. And you'll see other paraphrases of the Orthodox liturgy here. The other thing I would just highlight is the comparison in the poem to the rocket that hit 22 people standing in line for bread in Sarajevo. And the cellist, the first cellist of the Sarajevo orchestra, Vedran Smilovic, took his cello to the ruins of the bakery. And for 22 days, in celebration of those 22 lives, played Avenoni's Adagio for cello in G minor. Smilovic has since moved to Northern Ireland, where he continues to play and to perform and to compose. And he's composed his own Adagio in G minor for the cello, as a matter of fact. Just so you don't miss anything as we go through. So, okay. A cellist for Mariupol. One other thing. Mariupol, of course, means city of Mary. And the truth is that it was named for a Tsarina of the 18th century named Henna. Named Maria, of course. But I think in the minds of many Ukrainians, it's the city of Virgin Mary. And that's the way it's treated in the book. Holy Mary, Mother of God, Theotokos, pray for us now and at the hour of our deaths. We were standing in line for a meager slice of bread, body of Christ given up for you. Then the Russians came and shot us all. There is our blood on the sidewalk. Blood of Christ, blood of the fall, poured out for you, for the forgiveness of sins, for the forgiveness of this sin. In Sarajevo, the rocket struck 22 in line for bread, body of Christ, given up for you beneath the angry sky. Their blood poured out for you on the broken stones of Bosnia and the ruins of that bakery. Came Smilovic for 22 days and poured out the Adagio. Are you not crazy to play your cello where the rockets are falling every day? They're not crazy to drop their rockets while I am playing my cello. Where I am playing my cello. These ruins are sacred now, and their silence sweeps on the wind. Mariupol, there is no cellist. City of Mary, weep for your children, who had no Adagio for their blood, no silence for their memory, no bread for their hunger, and only willowed wind for breath. Mary, full of grace and full of grief, blessed among women, for blessed is the song of your womb, which has borne the Savior of our souls. Walk with us now among the riven stones. Who palms these children lying beneath the stones? A bloody shoe here, and a broken doll there. Where there were people in line for bread, now only dust. No birds sing in Mariupol, no cello, no Adagio, no prayer, no orison. Even the wind is silent now. Rain wets the dust. Goodness, we have plenty of time. We can do the Wall of Stephen if you want.
Yeah, it's there. there sort of for historical interest, but, I don't know, what do you think? Anyone have any questions or comments or?
Well, I will say that, any on Zoom, who didn't have an opportunity to get the, hard copy of these poems, is welcome to let me know if you want them. And I'll be happy to, email them to you. And our next Sunday forum in 2 weeks is going to be presented by two women from Faith in Action. Faith in Action is a nonprofit that is the successor of Action, of which this congregation was a part, and we are now involved in Faith in Action too. And of course, it's devoted to putting our faith in action through seeking a variety of objectives in social justice. So, I hope you'll join us and those two women. And I would say that Philip Moore has been instrumental in bringing this Sunday forum to us, and we want to thank Philip for us. Maybe he'll even moderate that. But he's not here to object either.
Okay, that's perfect, yeah.
Okay, well, put them in.
Yeah.
That's the tradition in my college, that the way we vote in the secretary for the college meetings is we pick someone who's not there. Yeah.
Oh, by the way.
That's how we always do it. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly.
Exactly. Well, I wonder if there are any comments or questions about any of what you've heard this morning.
Or from the Zoomers,
What's that?
or from the Zoomers could comment. in the
Oh,
chat.
yeah. Michelle, do you have anything in the chat box there?
Well, mostly it has to do with getting hard copies of the
Oh.
wonderful poems that were read today, along with some gratitude and appreciation for the beauty of the reading of all of these poems today. So thank you to both of you for that. And Kevin, I hope it's okay. I dropped your email address into the chat so that people could email you directly, but I know with certainty that both Doro and Rosalind would like copies.
Okay, all right. Well, then I have to do when I get home.
And are you still teaching?
Yeah.
What are your students feeling about this particular subject? And
You know, let me just think. I definitely have taught the Metris poems. The Soma Sharif, I wrote an article on, but I haven't, that some of the students read in a class. I am not seeing, I mean, I'm teaching a graduate poetry workshop now. I'm seeing poems about much distress about the way of the world, but maybe not so much about war. Yeah. I guess that's, I mean, that definitely, concerns with the ways of the world and for graduate students in the humanities, there's a whole set of concerns about whether they're gonna get a job and things like that. So I think that's pretty front and center. Yeah, but definitely, I mean, I do have a doctoral student who's writing on the contemporary novels of disaster. So I think that's also, that the kind of environmental crisis is maybe more evident in their writing and their concerns, which is not unrelated to the military, pollution of the world and all of that. Yeah. Thanks for
Do you
asking
think-
that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you think that it would be like with the climate and things like that, because it's more realistic and you're feeling it and seeing, and we've been having input on it for decades now, and it's finally,
Right,
as opposed to the wars on TV.
right, yeah.
We don't it's not our brothers and fathers that are going over there, so it's not as real, particularly with the technological age, you know, there's so much like TikTok, whatever, that's just not real, it's out there.
Right.
You don't connect to it.
Yeah, so I
it's
actually,
not affecting you.
yeah, definitely.
You know, immediately affect.
Right, and I mean, I just learned that Reno is apparently the most rapidly warming city in the US.
Yeah.
And,
Highest allergy.
yeah, and then I just taught a wonderful, poem, by a poet named Brian Tier. And the line just keeps sticking with me, but he writes a lot about, he's sort of a poet who takes walks a lot. So he writes about his walks, but he has one poem that starts with an oil spill in San Francisco area. And he says something like, this is the first disaster I could walk to. And so I think that sense of it being like right there and looking at the birds that are, you know, have oil on them and smelling the smell and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many disasters. I'm sorry.
That's
right.
I like
It's
that.
not-
Oh, it's not me.
And
Oh, it's not me. Oh, someone else has the same thing.
Bob?
He's answering the phone.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.